So then you start coding the design using Verilog or a VHDL or System Verilog. Once you start this, at the same time what happens is the verification team also, after understanding the specifications, it tries to generate the various scenarios or the various situations or the various specifications each of which requires a test case. When each of this requires a test case, then they will write down a list of scenarios for which test cases will need to be developed. Parallel activity goes on between the design team and the verification team. As I mentioned earlier, verification team is almost twice or 2.5 times the size of the design team, because verification is a massive effort. Verification does not add any functionality to the design. Verification is only a way of ensuring that there are no bugs left in the design. Of course, you cannot prove that there are no bugs in the design, but the thing is you have to keep verifying and increasing the test cases, number of test cases, such that each and every specification, every nook and corner of the design gets covered by verification or is exercised, the design is exercised during verification. So what we can do to help the verification, we means design engineers can do to help the verification engineers in their job, is using good coding practices to avoid the pitfalls in the design. Coding also has got certain guidelines. When you do RTL coding, there are certain guidelines which you need to follow in order to prevent the occurrence of bugs right in the initial stages itself. That's what we call in English is nipping the problem in the bud itself. Okay, so just as the problem is about to come, if you nip it in the bud, that is, if you just bury that problem there itself by using good coding practices, then that is a desirable thing, and it is almost every company has got its own set of standards, the best practices they call for design coding. As I said in the last session, we will take questions towards the end, towards the last 10 minutes of this particular session. Okay, please bear that in mind. I will give you a background of Verilog HDL at this stage. Okay, I have mentioned some things about Verilog, but what are the features? Of course, I must mention here, and you must also understand that it is not possible to teach Verilog in these 10 days of 2 hours per day sessions. Impossible. Okay, so I am just going to give you a brief overview of what are the Verilog features and why Verilog is used mostly these days, System Verilog also, okay, in the coding of designs which have to go into VLSI chips. It's introduced by Philip Moorby in 1985, as I mentioned earlier. In 1995, it got its first IEEE recognition by way of IEEE 1364 standard. Then we had Verilog 2K, Verilog 2000 and Verilog 2005, which came to be known as System Verilog. It's a dominant standard, one of the most dominant standards, more dominant than VHDL, okay, for advanced electronic designs because of its clarity. Now, Verilog has got much the same syntactic structure like C language. Okay, most of the constructs, high-level constructs in C language are also available in Verilog. The if, else, the while loop, the for construct, all these things, and the case construct, which is equivalent to a switch construct in the C language. All these are there. It's fairly clear. It is simple enough. It has got good powerful features, and more important, a wide range of tools are available to handle Verilog codes and Verilog environment. Okay, many people when they talk about Verilog, sometimes they refer to Verilog as a language, sometimes they refer to Verilog as an environment. Environment means the whole set of software tools and settings and all these things is called the environment. Some of the people refer to Verilog as a simulator, that means as a software which is going to compile, simulate, or elaborate and execute Verilog code in simulation. I will talk about simulation also a little later. It has got vast libraries available. okay, libraries of various units which will go into the usage of Verilog, okay, code. ASICs are signed off by vendors running Verilog. That means signed off means whenever you are developing an ASIC chip, sign off is basically the final certification for a particular activity. Now, for example, if you are doing static timing analysis, or if you are doing timing analysis using static timing analysis tool like PrimeTime from Synopsys, PrimeTime is what is known as a sign-off tool. That means if you have generated a report on the static timing analysis and that report indicates that everything is okay, there are no problems at all, okay, then it is signed off. It's a industry standard and is used as a sign-off tool. Therefore, ASICs are signed off by vendors running Verilog. Vendors means manufacturers, vendors of chips. Verilog commands a higher share of the market in the market today, more than VHDL. VHDL was introduced by the Department of Defense in USA mainly to document the designs rather than to generate high level code for creating logic networks or logic gates or logic circuits. It was more as a documentation language. Verilog came later than VHDL, okay, but then it gained more popularity because of its simplicity, and later on more and more tools are available for use with the Verilog as an HDL. That is the main features of Verilog. It is possibly the best language for building digital systems. When I say Verilog, it includes now System Verilog also, because it is an upgrade of Verilog, okay. And Verilog leads VHDL. Its goal is to make digital designers most productive. What is the productivity of an engineer? The productivity of a software engineer is the number of lines of code that a software engineer writes per day, okay, and that includes documentation, testing, development, everything, okay. A few years ago, maybe for C language, the average productivity of a software engineer was maybe roughly about 50 lines of C code per day, completely documented, all these things done. That means once the product is ready, you go into the number of lines of code, divide by the total number of engineers working on that particular project in the software group, and then you arrive at an average number of lines of code which each engineer produces per day. That is the productivity. For a hardware engineer, it is measured in terms of, and especially a VLSI engineer, a design engineer, it is measured in terms of how many gates, logic gates per day have been synthesized or generated per day. Verilog has evolved because of its open standard. Okay, a standard must be open so that others can use it and build on it and compete with it to make it better. Because Verilog is an open standard, lot of developments, people have suggested lot of developments, and the Verilog is also, there is a body also which actually governs the features of the particular language Verilog, and several companies and representatives from several companies sit on that particular executive committee or a body which has got the improvement of Verilog as its one of its main charter or main objective. Okay. As I mentioned, Verilog is sometimes referred to as a language, sometimes it is referred to as a simulator, and sometimes as an environment. I just want to go through this in a very brief way, but without actually telling you about the syntax of the Verilog language and all the other features. That's not really required over here, and it's not possible also. This is not a course on Verilog. Verilog in colleges is taught for over one semester, and that too the whole Verilog is not covered. Okay, but so where is the question of covering Verilog at 2 hours per day in 10 or 12 days? Not possible. But the type of operators that are available in Verilog, I will just run through these. you have the normal arithmetic operator like plus, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and mod operator. Mod operator is basically if you have A mod B, then the mod operator gives the remainder of whatever is whatever is left when A is divided by B. Okay, A and B are kind of whole numbers and the remainder is what is known as mod. So basically for a mod operator we have 10 mod 4 is equal to 2, because when 10 is divided by 4 the remainder is 2, so therefore 10 mod 4 is equal to 2. So this mod operator is also available as an arithmetic operator in Verilog. There are bitwise operators in which this stands for the negation of a quantity. If you have an 8-bit quantity called F0, then the negation of this 8-bit quantity F0 will be 0F, because F all ones will go to zeros and the other 0 all zeros will go to 1. So the negation of F0 is 0F. The ANDing of two multi-bit quantities, this is the ORing, this is the XORing. XOR, A XOR B is represented by this. Bitwise, every bit of A will be XORed with every bit of B. Then this is the XNOR, this or this. Any one of these two symbols can be used as XNOR. There is a difference between bitwise operation and logical operation. This is a logical NOT, this is a bitwise NOT. A bitwise NOT is not the same as logical NOT. For example, if you have a quantity called bitwise NORing is not the same as logical NORing or logical negation. For example, if you have a quantity called 5A, the bitwise negation of this will be A5. The bitwise negation of that will be A5. But the logical negation of 5A will be 0. The logical negation, because logical negation means if any quantity is non-zero, the logical negation becomes 0. If any quantity is 0, the logical negation becomes 1. That is the difference between logical negation and a bitwise negation. Similarly, this is logical ANDing. Logical ANDing will give you a quantity of 1 only when both the quantities are non-zero. And this is logical ORing. Okay. So there is a difference between bitwise ORing and logical ORing. Reduction operators, AND, basically it will take a multi-bit quantity and do the AND of all the bits in that quantity. This is a bitwise reduction operator ORing. It will OR all the bits in that particular multi-bit quantity. Like that you have several operators. One is the shift operator, shift left and shift right by the required number of positions. This is relational operators comparing A less than B. If you say A is less than B, if that is true, the output of that comparison is 1. Inequality is 1. If that inequality turns out true, the result is a Boolean 1. Okay. Similarly, for all of these 4 operators, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. Equality operators say equal to, not equal to. This is what is known as case equality. I will not go into this, but it has something to do with the treatment of X. Verilog is a 4-valued language. It has got 4 values, logical values 0, 1, X and Z. It has got 4 values and therefore case equality has to do with how the treatment to X and Z is given. Similarly, this is case inequality. Then conditional operator, you have this. For example, this is like this. This is called a ternary operator, also in the C language it is there. This operator is for this flower braces is for concatenation, and this operator is for replication. Replication means if you want to take a bit pattern and like two bits 0 1, and if you want to assign it 4 times, if you want to replicate this like 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 1, then you write 4 over here, you write the 0 1 bits over here, and then once you assign this to a particular quantity, that quantity will get the value of 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 1. 4 times 0 1 is an 8-bit quantity. These are all the operators that are available in the Verilog language. I am mentioning these here because we will have an occasion to look at several of these operators a little later when I give you a sample code of a particular unit, a designed unit a little later. what are the high level Verilog features? When I say high level Verilog features, Verilog code can be written for modeling the functionality of a particular block. Okay. When you say modeling, what is modeling mean? Modeling is not the same thing that you see the catwalk and ramp walk and all that modeling. No, that's not the modeling. Here this modeling is basically trying to represent in software the functionality of the logic element that is going to get synthesized as a result of the synthesis step. So basically you are trying to capture the functionality of that particular device in software. That is what is known as modeling. And models can be rough, approximate, or they can be accurate. Okay. If you want just a high level what if analysis means just to find out how this is going to work, you may not need to go into the exact details, lower level details of that functionality. You can just do at a coarse or a broad top level functionality and then try to find out whether it is going to work or not, workable or not. Later on, when you go deeper and deeper, at that time you can introduce more and more details into your model. So what are these constructs, the high or Verilog features? These features are, one is the if else construct. Yeah, if else construct, just the same way that you have in C. If else, okay, C you may have then and all that. Here you have if else, else if, all these things are there. The for construct is there. The case construct is there, similar to the switch in the C, construct in the C language. While construct is there, repeat construct is there, fork join is also one of the differences between Verilog and C. There are a lot of similarities, but there are a few differences as well. So what are those differences between Verilog and C? One of the main difference is that Verilog has got the concept of concurrency, because Verilog is going to model hardware. Therefore, hardware, many of the gates, different gates will be working simultaneously on different signals. So that concept of concurrency is there in Verilog, which is not there in the C language. C language executes this code right from the top down to the bottom sequentially. Of course, if there is a flow control, it alters the flow of control, no doubt, but by and large the code executes from the top to bottom sequentially, and once you encounter the last line of code, the execution of the code is over. Verilog design code never stops, because the hardware is not supposed to stop. As long as it is getting any input, it is supposed to be working on that input and provide the necessary outputs. Therefore, the main difference between Verilog and C is the concept of concurrency, which is introduced in Verilog. Fork join actually brought me to this point of concurrency, because this is the one which causes the code to execute in parallel. Parallel means executing at the same time. Which time am I mentioning here? I am referring not to the real time, that is the wall clock time, or maybe wall clock time or the real time, but I am referring to the simulation time. Simulation time. Concurrency is always with respect to simulation time. Okay. Then we have always and initial procedural blocks. The always block and initial blocks are known as procedural blocks. The only difference is the initial block is used in test benches and the always blocks is used in design as well as in test bench. Blocking and non-blocking assignments are two different kinds of assignments which are available in Verilog. For all those students who have completed their maybe 4th year or completed their 3rd year also, they might have undergone a course in Verilog, because I think JNTU offers a particular subject or has a particular subject. Previously it was called Digital Design through Verilog, DDTV. I don't know now what is the name of that particular thing. Maybe R13, R15 or all those revisions of the syllabus have this course, and therefore many of you would be familiar with all these blocking assignments. Only familiar, but I am not sure that you will be able to use them if you are asked to use them in Verilog designs. Okay. So Verilog is used in writing design code as well as in writing verification code. When we say verification code, verification is also a Verilog program. Design is also a Verilog program. What is the verification program do? The verification program will apply the inputs to the design program. Therefore, a verification also is a Verilog program and design also is a Verilog program. However, all features of Verilog are not synthesizable. Synthesizability refers to the aspect of being able to put that particular functionality in silicon. If you are able to synthesize that, it means that it can go into silicon, because synthesis is a process of converting your Verilog code into gates which execute the same functionality as your Verilog code. Verilog code, we will see to it. We will see later what are the different levels of Verilog code that are possible. So, because all features of Verilog are not synthesizable, only those that are synthesizable can be used in the Verilog code that is meant for design. Verilog code meant for design is synthesized, whereas the Verilog code that is written for the test bench is often not synthesized. Most of the times, 99.99% of the time, it is not required to synthesize the code that is written for verification. Okay. Because that particular code, being software centric, has got many features for data handling, maybe structures, and all the other features are available in that in the verification code. Verification code can use the entire gamut of features that are available in the Verilog language, whereas design code cannot use those all features, because it has to restrict itself only to the synthesizable subset of Verilog. This is the point number 4. Why is design code written? Design code is written to model the behavior of logic elements. That is the main objective of writing design code. And why do we write and why do we simulate? The reason for simulation is to find out whether the functionality of the intended chip is being correctly modeled or not, because it is very easy to make changes in the software. Therefore, if there are any problems in the model or if in the functionality, the model is not executing as per the intended design specifications, then it is very easy to change in the software, rather than having manufactured an ASIC, then finding that some of the problems still exist, there are many problems that exist, and then remanufacturing it once again. It's a very, very, very expensive process to remanufacture an ASIC, because a lot of things need to get changed. The process node, the technology may be the same, but once you change the circuits inside an ASIC, all the masks that have been made for doing the interconnections will have to change. And making new masks is an extremely expensive process, because with the advancement in technology, masks are becoming more and more expensive, because newer and newer techniques need to be deployed in order to etch out the correct pattern on that particular metal layer to form the interconnects. The reason being is that when the ultraviolet light is deployed for exposing the wafer through the mask's transparent regions. Now what happens is, when the transparent regions or the feature size in an IC approaches the wavelength of light, ultraviolet light may have some wavelength. When it approaches the wavelength of light, or even smaller than the wavelength of light, then we encounter, when the whole thing is exposed through an ultraviolet radiation there is always the phenomenon of diffraction. Therefore, light, instead of traveling like this, it will pass through that small slit in that particular mask, which is extremely small, and diffract and go and hit somewhere else. So basically it means that there are problems in etching and problems in making masks. So therefore different techniques will have to be employed for making these masks. As you may perhaps see later on, optical proximity correction, OPC, or what is known as double patterning. These are some of the techniques that will be used in making masks, and which will be covered in the last 3 or 4 days, where physical design aspects will be addressed. Continuing with the slide, what is meant by abstraction? Abstraction is the absence of details. Very simply put, abstraction is the absence of details. Why abstraction is required? Why do you need to avoid unnecessary details? You need to avoid unnecessary details in order to make the computation fast, in order to execute that program in as quick a time as possible, so that if there are any changes to be made, a number of iterations may be required to be made, and these iterations can be executed when the turnaround time, the execution time for simulation is very small, is pretty small. First, when you write the Verilog code for large chips, it is generally written at what is known as a behavioral level, and also called many a times loosely called RTL. Not loosely, it is called RTL, register transfer level, register transfer language some people say, but it is RTL. This code written at RTL is technology independent, which means that it does not assume that such and such a technology is going to be used for this particular logic or for manufacturing of a particular chip. It is technology independent, and it captures only the behavior of the functional behavior of that particular logic block that it has modeled. Even this code, RTL code, doesn't even know about what will be the delays of the particular gates and all that, because it doesn't assume the presence of any gates at all. What the RTL code does is it assumes that there is no underlying logic. The whole of the code that is written here is executed by the processor which is running your simulation program. And when this simulation program, on what does it run? Simple, it runs on your laptops, your 486 or x86 based laptops or AMD based laptops. Laptop has got a simulator program, and that simulator program takes your Verilog code and executes it on the processor. Where is the question of the logic gates like multiplexer, AND gate, NOR gate, NAND gate, or all other gates coming in? It's just that it executes it as a software program and gives you the result of the execution. If that result is correct, then the next step would be to go and synthesize that particular program so that the equivalent functionality is also generated by the logic gates and their interconnections, which will function in exactly the same way that you have written your software. That is the synthesis step. It will come later. So Verilog code, which is output from the synthesis tool. Now mind you, I will talk about it when we go to synthesis. Verilog code, which is output from the synthesis tool, is at the gate level, and this code is often called the netlist. Some of the people use netlist as a single word, some of the people used netlist as two different words. Just as some of the books used test bench as a single word, some of the books used test and bench as two separate words. It doesn't matter as long as you understand what it is going to mean. Netlist level simulation is much slower than RTL level simulation. You must understand that you should never simulate your code at a lower level, because lower level involves too many details, and the more the details that are present, the more the computation requirement is there. The more the computation requirement, the greater is the time taken by the processor to execute these computational requirements, and therefore the time taken to execute simulation at the netlist level is far slower than the time taken to execute simulation at the RTL level. Therefore RTL is the level at which you must check for the functionality of the circuit. As long as you are working at the RTL level, the code is technology independent, and any functional block which you may have designed and kept at the RTL level for reuse somewhere else, is often called what is known as a soft macro. Macro is a pre-designed and a pre-verified block, and it is also called an IP. IP stands for intellectual property. So this these are the high level features of Verilog, and at this point of time I think it is a good time for taking questions. If you have any questions, you can ask these questions, and I will take them and try to answer them one by one. let the questions be more relevant to the topic that has been covered, because questions relating to admission into Veda and into other VLSI institutes can always be answered if you write a mail to me. Yesterday I had told you about I had given my mail ID to you. You can write to me and I will try to answer your questions in mail. As far as doubts regarding whatever presentation has been given are concerned, you can ask these questions. I will proceed with my talk. If any question comes along, then I will stop and answer those questions and then proceed again. It is like an interrupt subroutine. The main program is executing. A phone call is like an interrupt subroutine where we have to service that request, and once that request is serviced, then the main flow of control is taken up again. Okay, so now we have come to a point where we have discussed all the features of Verilog, and now we will look at how the typical flow will look like. I will put a slide here right now, and this slide will not be complete, but we will discuss briefly about the blocks over here and carry over the explanation of this slide in more detail to the other side of the break. Okay, I have tried my best to incorporate colors in the block diagram and light colors wherein the text will be visible to you. I hope this is visible. Just read out. So when we start with a specification document, which, as I mentioned earlier, is given out to the design group and the verification group. Hello, yeah, one call is coming in. Let me take it. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, can you be a little louder, please?
Yes. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Hari Krishna.
Yes. As you said yesterday that latch-up condition can be used for clock gating, but most of the time while writing a Verilog code, they says that we need to avoid latch-up condition while coding.
Correct. Yes, you are right.
Yeah. What is the reason why we should avoid a latch-up condition while coding? And what is the significance of latch-up, and how can we avoid latch-up condition while coding?
Yeah, if you intend to create a latch at any point of time, yes, you must go ahead and use the latch over there. But many a times what happens is, if your Verilog coding is not as per the guidelines, then when you intend to have a combinational circuit somewhere, okay, if your coding is not correctly done, you may end up having a latch in place of a combinational circuit. You may end up having a latch in place of a combinational circuit. So basically you must avoid latches where combinational circuits are expected to be synthesized. Second thing is, why latches should be avoided was something that the timing analysis tools and synthesis tool, maybe timing analysis tools in those days were perhaps not as advanced as they are today. Therefore, timing analysis tools found it difficult maybe to handle latches. So it came as a legacy from the past, saying that latches must be avoided. But if you look at microprocessors or any processor which is a high-speed processor, there are hundreds of latches there in the processor. Maybe the timing analysis is for these processors is done by in-house developed tools which are not available commercially off the shelf. Therefore, for use with off the shelf commercially available tools, okay, it is easier to have flip-flops because the timing analysis tool will be able to handle the timing analysis algorithm better when flip-flops are used instead of latches. Hello, Sanjay. Yeah, please ask your question.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, how can we relate the width and resistance are in NMOS and PMOS? Resistance and the width of the channel.
Resistance and the width of the channel. The resistance, the bulk resistance. I am talking of the bulk resistance. There are two types of resistances. Okay, one is what is known as the bulk resistance, and one is what is known as the incremental or the small signal resistance. Okay.
Okay.
When we talk about the capacitor charging through a particular PMOS device or discharging through a particular NMOS device, we are talking of the bulk, we are referring to the bulk resistance. How can we calculate? We can calculate based on the characteristics that are available for a particular NMOS or a PMOS device. If you want me to show that, I can show it to you through the use of a particular slide which I had put up earlier for the particular characteristics. I'll just go back once again to the characteristics of a, if this slide, if you look at this slide, okay, I said yesterday that this portion is having a zero slope, okay, and in this portion I said that it is like a constant current source with internal resistance being infinity, but that is a small signal resistance, that is a small signal current source. The bulk resistance, if you take at this point, the bulk resistance will be this voltage, okay, divided by this current. At this point the bulk resistance will be this voltage on the x-axis divided by the current on the y-axis. So if you draw a line from there to there, this slope like this, that slope will give you the bulk resistance which is for the PMOS or the NMOS device at this point. That is the bulk resistance. Okay, this is how the resistance is calculated. It's very simple. From the characteristics you can find out what is the bulk resistance. Now I said this is a constant current source, okay, for incremental currents. Okay, you must understand that is the difference between a DC resistance and an AC resistance. Okay, just as you have a DC signal and an AC signal in your amplifiers, there is a DC resistance and an AC resistance. The DC resistance is nothing but the x-axis at this point divided by the y-axis at this point, because x-axis is plotting current and y-axis is plotting voltage. Incremental resistance is the slope of this, which is 0. Conductance is 0, therefore resistance is infinity. That's what it is. Okay. Any other questions? No questions are coming in. So I think it is a good point to stop this session at this point. I will take up aspects of simulation, verification, and some of the metrics. Thank you for being with me. Okay, I will see you on the other side of the break. Thank you. Namaste, welcome back after the break. Let's continue where we left off earlier. Just a little bit of overlap with whatever we have discussed before the break. I want to once again go through the features, the Verilog features, and explain to you all these things once again. Okay, higher abstraction means absence of details. It is required to have as few details as possible initially, so that we get a good idea, and execution of simulation is very, very quick. Therefore we write code at the behavioral level, also called RTL. This is technology independent. When I say technology independent, it means that I can take the same code and target it to make a chip at a different technology node with a different process node, because it doesn't contain, Verilog written at the behavioral level doesn't contain any technology dependent factors like the delays of the gates, the sizes of the gates, and anything. It is pure functionality. There is no timing involved. Okay, this behavioral code, the RTL, you can make it operate at 1 gigahertz or 10 gigahertz also by just having a clock of that particular time period. That's it. You can make it work. It's pure functionality. Timing will come into the picture only when it has been synthesized and the elements, logic elements, have been picked up from a technology library, and these logic elements will be actual physical logic elements whose representation is is identical to its behavior in hardware, but right now it is representation in software. Right now means in the library it is a software representation of a hardware behavior. Okay. Then netlist level simulation is much slower than RTL level simulation, and therefore RTL level simulation needs to be done extensively in order to verify 100% or maybe 110% of the functionality, and netlist level simulation is not really done extensively because it will take days and days together to complete a simulation run at the netlist level, because so much of calculation, computation of the gate outputs, delays, interconnections, interconnect delay, all these things are required to be computed, that it will take an extremely long time when we are dealing with chips at the million or a billion transistor level. It's very difficult, so it's not done there. Now for this particular, in this session we will talk about the VLSI manufacturing flow. When I talk about VLSI manufacturing flow, I am referring to the ASIC manufacturing flow, because the tools that I will be mentioning later on in this session are the ASIC tools, ASIC development tools, not the FPGA development tools, because FPGA development tools, there is a difference between the ASIC development tools and the FPGA development tools. Let me highlight those differences over here, and possibly I'll make a slide. I haven't made one, but I'll make a slide to put it in black and white. What are the differences? But the primary difference is the ASIC development tools are meant for production of a chip, for a manufacturing of a chip. I will say FPGA development tools are meant for putting a design into an already constructed, fabricated, manufactured part called FPGA. Therefore, third-party vendors like Synopsys is not a manufacturing, it's not a fab. Okay, Synopsys is an EDA tool company. Okay, therefore, ASIC tools are typically developed by some other companies called third-party vendors, whereas FPGA tools are developed by the FPGA manufacturer itself. That means, for example, take the case of Xilinx. Okay, Xilinx comes to my mind because I was earlier working with Xilinx. So Xilinx makes FPGA. Of course, now Xilinx has been taken over or acquired by AMD. But Xilinx makes its own FPGA, gets it fabricated. The FPGA is fabricated from, let's say, fab companies like TSMC in Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. So it gets it manufactured from Taiwan, but the software that is required for the users of these FPGAs is developed by Xilinx itself. It is not developed by somebody else, by a third party, because Xilinx knows exactly what is inside the FPGA, what are the resources available inside the FPGA in terms of logic gates, in terms of flip-flops, in terms of mega cells like a DSP block, in terms of interfaces like a USB interface, PCI Express interface, or also in terms of interconnect resources, what are short resources, what are long resources, what are the clock routing resources. All these things Xilinx is aware of the internals of its FPGA. Therefore, it would not want any other software developer to know about the internals and develop the tools. So Xilinx tools, like for example the ISC of the previous years, or now Vivado, is developed by Xilinx itself, so that this software can make full and the best use of the available resources inside the FPGA. Therefore, while FPGA EDA tools come from the FPGA developer itself, the ASIC EDA tools come from third parties. Okay, not necessarily. So if let's say Cypress Semiconductors was manufacturing a chip, it will be using ASIC synthesis tools from either Cadence or Synopsys or many other names which are there prevalent in the market today. Okay, coming back, this is an ASIC design and manufacturing flow that I will be talking about. Okay, the specification is given to the design group and the verification group. Both of them read through the specification. Both of them read through the specification and try to understand the specification. This diagram has been simplified. That's why I will say a simplified overview of the ASIC design and manufacturing flow. That's what I will consider the title for this session to be. Now, when you design, when the specification goes to the design and the verification group, both of these read these specifications, and that reading and understanding may go on for several weeks. It is not as if they read it in one day and the next day they start designing. No, it's not like that. They not only read that, but they try to come to an understanding of what the specifications mean. The design group and the verification group may sit together and try to discuss their own understanding of the specifications. Why is that specification given to the design group as well as to the verification group? Is because the design group may have an understanding of the specification in its own way. Verification group may have its own understanding of the specification, and these should match completely, because based on the understanding of the specifications by the verification group, it will come up with a test bench. It will start developing a test bench and for the design that is going to come. The design, in the meanwhile, the design team would start working on breaking down the design into sub-blocks, trying to identify the interfaces that are necessary for communications between the sub-blocks, and all these things will go on. The verification team has to develop a test bench, and it has to apply the inputs to the design that is finally going to be verified. But initially there is no design that is available to be verified, and therefore what the verification group does is it will generate what is known as a bus functional model. That means at the pin level, what is going to be the behavior of the block. That kind of a behavior is developed by the verification group. They develop what is known as bus functional model of the particular design, not going into the internals, not knowing about the flip-flops. Just that if a particular input is given to the design on a particular line, then the output is expected after, say, let's say 23 nanoseconds or 24 nanoseconds or whatever it is. Accordingly, the verification group will will generate an output for after 24 nanoseconds. Whether that output was generated as a result of flip-flop or as a result of some other combination logic inside is not important for the verification group. It develops only bus functional models, which are much simpler to write compared to the detailed design, simpler and less time consuming. Therefore, they will be able to come up with their own bus functional model of the block and write and use it on the test bench, or use the test bench on that model. By doing that, what they are doing is they are also evolving that test bench. A test bench, once you write, it's not just over and you just throw it to the design team and say that this is the test bench and this is how you have to verify. Or for that matter, the design team will not be able to design it in just a week or a few days and just throw it to the verification team to say that go ahead and verify. No, it is a long drawn evolving process, and this needs to be taken proper care of. Then once all this exercise has been done and you come to a point where now we feel that the design team feels that it is time to go ahead and do a design and design entry. Design entry means what? The design entry is the action, is the part where the design actually gets entered and gets resident or stays in a computer system. The design stays in a computer system in a software form. Okay. Now that software form can either be in the form of a Verilog HDL, Verilog language, or it can be in the earlier years it was schematic capture. Schematic capture means drawing logic gates, interconnecting them on the system and all that. We had in the previous years, we had software like PCAD, OrCAD and Tanner, LEdit and so on, the software which were there for schematic capture. So the design was captured at a schematic level, that means at the logic gate level, and then stored into the system through the interconnections. Okay. Whereas currently not many, or only if the design is very small and it needs to be entered, it could be entered as a schematic, but it is much easier to write it in a Verilog language, okay, and have it pass through the synthesis tool, so that the synthesis tool will generate the required gates and their interconnections which adhere or which stick to the functional specification or to the functionality of the block written in Verilog HDL. So that's how it is done these days, and this is done at a high level of abstraction, and the underlying logic is not assumed to be in any form, in any technology or whatever it is. For example, if you want to write the functionality of an adder, what you have to write as the main statement or the main execution statement of the Verilog code is like y is equal to a plus b. That's all. A could be an 8-bit quantity, B can be an 8-bit quantity, and Y can be a 9-bit quantity. As you all know, if you add two 8-bit quantities, you will get a 9-bit quantity. Therefore, you simply say Y is equal to A plus B, and then you provide values through the test bench. You provide values to A and B, keep changing them at periodic intervals at some times, and then you will see that the output also changes accordingly. But are we assuming what type of an adder is being used there? No, we are not assuming there. We are not assuming the presence of a ripple carry adder, or the presence of a carry look ahead adder, or the presence of a carry save adder, carry select adder, carry skip adder. There are so many different types of adders. Are we assuming that there will be a ripple carry adder, one of the basic adder structure there? No, it is not. What happens here is that the computer executes this statement by executing a series of software assembly language instructions. A and B are nothing but memory variables. They are stored in the memory, they are fetched from the memory, they are added in the accumulator and stored back into another memory variable called Y. That is how it is executed. It doesn't have a carry input, it doesn't have a sum output and a carry output. All these things are not assumed. Simply a software execution of a statement is done at the RTL level. Therefore, no details are involved here. That is the beauty of writing code in Verilog HDL. Once that is done, the code is written to some extent. Different blocks will be allocated to different people in the design team. They will write their own code, and their own interfaces have already been defined. And the designers also do what is meant by sanity level checking. That is, they write a simple test bench for checking that their code prima facie means basically is working okay or not. Once that is done, with some test cases they will use, they will then give it to the verification team for more exhaustive and extensive verification of that particular block. We are not talking about very simple blocks which consist of only one counter or one multiplexer or a counter and a multiplexer. Blocks are reasonably complex, typically of the order of about 3K, 4K or 5K gates. It could be like that, 5,000 gates. Okay, when synthesized, they might come to about 1,000 to 5,000 gates. That is the complexity of the blocks that we may need to subdivide into. Okay, not anything lower than that, because the more you go lower and lower and make it more and more simple, the number of interconnections between the sub blocks increases. Okay, so therefore we should not be completely at the top level and have no interconnections between the blocks at all. At the same time, we should not be so simplistic for each block that there will be a huge number of blocks which need to be interconnected. So in between, somewhere to a moderate level of complexity, the blocks are subdivided. Once that is done, a behavioral level simulation is done. Now, for doing what is meant by simulation, I have a slide which tells what is the difference between simulation and emulation. Okay, I will talk about that a little later, but right now we are concentrating on simulation. Behavioral simulation, behavioral because this code has been written using Verilog at the RTL level. Verilog can be written at various levels. Let me mention here, a small digression, let me mention here that Verilog can be written at the RTL level, many behavioral RTL level. It can be written at the gate level. It can be written at the switch level also. Okay, there is intermediate one more level called the data flow level. at the behavioral level, which is the highest level of abstraction, data flow level, slightly lower level of abstraction, gate level, and at the switch level. Gate level means you have gates written like AND gate, OR gate and all that, and at the switch level you have keywords like PMOS, NMOS or CMOS and all that used, and you can write Verilog code at the switch level to also describe an AND gate. You can write Verilog code at the gate level to describe an AND gate. You can write it at the data flow level to describe an AND gate, and you can write it at the behavioral level also. Sometimes for very simple things, behavioral level and data flow level may be one and the same. Okay, this is what it is. Then when you are doing behavioral simulation, what is required to be given to the design code? Now what is given as an input to the simulation environment is the design code which has been written over here. Design is done in terms of module. A module is a unit of design in Verilog. Just as the unit of functionality in a C language is a function, with all functions being named differently except one function which is called the main, which needs to have that particular name, fixed main function. Module in Verilog doesn't need to have a fixed name. It can be any meaningful name, a module, except that it has got certain rules which we need to follow. The module name cannot start with a numeral, it has to start with an alpha character only. That is what it is. Test bench, which was developed by the verification team. Now verification team has, as I said earlier, has got about 2.5 times the strength is of the design team. So verification team is a kind of a job which is a very, very responsible job, because if, God forbid, something is detected after the chip has been manufactured, some problem is coming in the chip after it has been manufactured and it is not working correctly in a particular situation. If that happens, then there is an analysis made of whether such a test has been done for this particular situation or not. If it says, if it is found that there has been no test which has been developed or which has been created for this kind of a situation, which shows a failure in the field means at the end user's site, then the verification team is really taken to task. It would also mean a loss of job for the verification manager. It could mean, not always it does happen, but it could mean, depending upon the seriousness of the situation. If the company is looking to capture the market with this particular product, and then it is seen that this product has got some defects inside, then a respin of this particular chip is required. Millions and millions of dollars would be required to be spent once more, okay, and that would erode into the profits of that organization. So that's a serious view that the management takes about the loss. Loss means loss of money that has happened. Why has it happened? Because the verification